Julia says, Left anything? Oh, you mean my spectacles? No, they're here. Besides, they're no use to me. I'm not coming back again this evening. Lavinia says, Stop. I want you to explain the telegram. Julia says, Explain the telegram? What do you think, Alex? Alex says, No, Julia. We can't explain the telegram. I'm sure that you could explain the telegram. I don't know why, but it seems to me that yesterday I started to some machine that goes on working and I cannot stop it. No, it's not like a machine. Or if it's a machine, someone else is running it. But who? Someone else is always inferring. I don't feel free, and yet I started it. Julia says to Lavinia, to Alex. Uh, Alex, do you think we could explain anything? Alex says, I don't think so, Julia. She must find out for herself. That's the only way, Julia says. How right you are. Well, my dears, I shall see you very soon, Edward says. When shall we see you? Julia says, Did I say you'd see me? Goodbye, I believe. I haven't left anything. Peter enters and says, I've got a taxi, Julia. Julia says, Splendid. Goodbye. Julia exits, and Alex and Peter also exit. Lavinia says, I must say, you don't seem very pleased to see me. Edward says, I can't say that I've had much opportunity to seem anything, but of course, I'm glad to see you. Lavinia says, Yes, that was a silly thing to say. Like a girl, like Celia. I don't know why I said it. Well, here I am. Edward says, I'm to ask no questions. Lavinia says, and I know I'm to give no explanations. Edward says, and I'm to give no explanations. Lavinia says, and I am to ask no questions, and yet why not? Edward says, I don't know why not. So, what are we to talk about? Lavinia says, there's one thing I ought to know because of other people and what to do about them. It's about that party. I suppose you won't believe I forgot all about it. I let you down badly. What did you do about it? I only remembered after I had left. Edward says, I telephoned to everybody I knew was coming, but I couldn't get everyone. And so a few came. Lavinia said, Who came? Edward says, Just those who were here this evening. Lavinia says, That's odd. Edward says, And one other, I don't know who he was, but you ought to know. Lavinia says, Yes, I think I know, but I'm puzzled about Julia. That woman is the devil. She knows by instinct when something's going to happen. Trust her not to miss any awkward situation. And what did you tell them? Edward says, I invented an aunt who was ill in the country and had sent for you. Lavinia says, Really, Edward? You had better have told the truth. Nothing less than the truth could deceive Julia. But how did the aunt come to live in Essex? Edward says, Julia compelled me to make her live somewhere. Lavinia says, I see, so Julia made her live in Essex and made the telegrams come from Essex. Well, I shall have to tell Julia the truth. I shall always tell the truth now. We've wasted such a lot of time in lying. And particularly people who've been drinking can lose track of truth and lie. Other intoxicants, too, can aid in that process. But Edward says, I don't quite know what you mean. Lavinia says, Oh, Edward, the point is that since I've been away, I see that I've taken you much too seriously. And now I can see how absurd you are. Edward says, That's a very serious conclusion to have arrived at in how many? 32 hours? Lavinia says, Yes, a very important discovery, finding that you've spent 5 years of your life with a man who has no sense of humor. Well, you can take yourself seriously and have a sense of humor, And that the effect upon me was that I lost all sense of humor myself. That's what came of always giving in to you. Edward says, I was unaware that you always given in to me. It struck me very differently. As we're on the subject, I thought that it was I who had given in to you. Lavinia says, I know what you mean by giving in to me. You mean leaving all practical decisions that you should have made yourself, I remember. Oh, I ought to have realized what was coming when we were planning our honeymoon. I couldn't make you say where you wanted to go. Well, every other man, really. Edward says, but I wanted you to make that decision. Lavinia says, but how could I tell where I wanted to go unless you suggested some other place first? Well, conflict. It's just as his principle, you know. And I remember that finally in desperation I said, I suppose you'd as soon go to Peacehaven. And you said, I don't mind. Edward says, of course I didn't mind. I meant it as a compliment. Lavinia says, you meant it as a compliment? And you were so considerate, people said. And he thought you were unselfish. It was only passivity. You only wanted to be bolstered, encouraged. Edward says, encouraged? To what? Lavinia says, to think well of yourself. You know, it was I who made you work at the bar. Edward says, you nagged me because I didn't get enough work, and said that I ought to meet more people when the briefs began to come in, and they didn't come through any of your friends. You suddenly found it inconvenient that I should be always too busy, or too tired, to be unused of you to socially. Lavinia says, I never complained. Edward says, no, and it's perfectly infuriating the way you didn't complain. Lavinia says, it was you who complained of seeing nobody but solicitors and clients. Edward says, and you were never very sympathetic. Lavinia says, but, well, I tried to do something about it. That's why I took so much trouble, to have those Thursdays to give you the chance of talking to intellectual people. Well, people have their own different senses of intellectual, but Edward says, you would have given me about as much opportunity if you had hired me as your butler. Some of your guests may have thought I was the butler, Lavinia says, and on several occasions, when somebody was coming, whom I particularly wanted you to meet, you didn't arrive until just as they were leaving. Edward says, well, at least they can't have thought I was the butler. Lavinia says, everything I tried only made matters worse, and the moment you were offered something that you wanted something else. I shall treat you very differently in the future. Edward says, thank you for the warning, but tell me, since this is how you see me, why did you come back? Lavinia says, frankly, I don't know. I was warned of the danger, yet something or somebody compelled me to come. And why did you want me? Edward says, I don't know either. You say you were trying to encourage me, then why did you always make me feel insignificant? I may have known what life I wanted, but it wasn't the life that you chose for me. You wanted your husband to be successful. You wanted me to supply a public background for your kind of public life. You wished to be a hostess, for whom my career would be support. Well, I tried to be accommodating, but in future I shall behave, I assure you, very differently. Lavinia says, bravo, Edward, this